Yo guys, what is up? Max in our Borderlands 4 video, and today we are talking about my impressions of playing Amon. Now, I've covered Amon in multiple videos, going over his skill tree, showing footage of his gameplay, but now I've actually gotten my chance to play him, as well as some new features that haven't been in previous builds that I played at Borderlands 4, such as the combat radar, which you should be seeing in the top right corner. By the way, just massive quality of life improvement over the compass, seeing all the enemies on a radar and getting the distance and the kind of like just more information. It made gameplay feel so much better. But I've learned a lot of things about Amon from playing him that I did not know. And so that is the purpose of this video. I hope you guys enjoyed the breakdown. Let's get right into it. So the first thing that was really interesting that I got to test is Amon's Crucible action skill, and specifically using melee with it. Now, this is an action skill that I had seen previous footage of people using, where you pull out these axes, these swords, these hammers, whatever it may be, and you're holding them, and you've got a prompt to either throw the left one or the right one. And so much of the gameplay that I had seen was just people throwing these melee weapons. And I was very, very curious if you could actually melee with them. And I am happy to confirm that these are not just for show. You can't, there's more than just throwing them. These are actually melee weapons that when you're holding dual swords or dual hammers or dual axes, you can, during the duration of this, use them as melee weapons. They replace your default melee attack. I believe they deal bonus damage or extra damage, as they're going to be dealing both your action skill damage plus elemental damage plus melee damage. And swinging them at enemies does not like drain your duration any faster. So I think what you're going to want to do, at least depending on if you build for it, is when you activate this action skill, you can go use the weapons as melee weapons. And if you ever played Brick in Borderlands 1, kind of just wail on enemies with them, and then right as the duration is about to end, then you throw the sword, the axe, whatever. And so you kind of get like a two phases of this action skill, which I think makes them even more dynamic, and they were already pretty crazy. And they rotate, or basically take turns attacking. So for example, with the swords, you have a fire sword and a shock sword. If you have an enemy that's like a just shielded bar, you can't like go just attacking them with the shock sword. You're going to be rotating swings between the fire and the shock sword, or like the ice and fire axe. Now, I wasn't spec'd for melee damage, so I'd be lying to you if I told you that these like felt incredibly powerful or like felt OP when I was meleeing enemies, because I was level 20 and I wasn't really spec'd for any like actual melee damage. But what I did get to experience with Amon, and my probably biggest takeaway from him versus the other Vault Hunters that I've gotten to play at the same level, is Amon's level of action skill spam at this level was easily the highest that you've ever seen. You've got, 3 stacks of your action skill, all of which you have a duration on which you can melee attack and throw these axes. So you've got like 3 stacks of it, and you've got your like Amon trait. I'm blanking on the name, that allows you to put the 2 axes together and throw them out. So that's basically 4 stacks, but they're on independent cooldowns. And after you throw these things out, your they turn into drones. They turn into forge drones. So it was just kind of this like always active presence of where, like, with some of the other Vault Hunters gameplay, you've got your action skill, you've got your moment of like big damage, and then that kind of goes away. It felt like with Amon, while his action skills weren't dealing as much damage as some of the other characters, they were just kind of something that was always involved in your gameplay. It was always happening. I'd have some times where I'd go into fight for my life, and these forge drones would kill enemies. They weren't they themselves doing a lot of damage if it was a single forge drone, but for example, when I had like 3 or 4 on a single enemy, they would go down pretty quick. The next action skill that I got to mess around with was Scourge. This is Amon's blue tree. Unfortunately, we weren't allowed to respec any of our skill points. So when I was playing with this action skill and trying it out, it was literally default action skill, 0 points invested into blue tree, zero augments or anything like that. So this was at its most basic version. But this skill is functioning a bit different than I kind of thought that it was functioning. So I kind of want to break it down real quick. So basically, when you summon this, you bring out a shield, and this shield will block damage or absorb damage. You can hip fire your guns. I didn't realize this till later, so I'm not sure what part of the gameplay is playing. But you can also fully ADS your gun. So you're basically, blocking all of the incoming damage. Your shield kind of has like a HP pool, so I think enemies can eventually break it. But you're absorbing all of your damage while also fully retaliating while shooting your gun. And in the very bottom left above the action skill, you'll see kind of segments, and these fill up based off of, I believe, damage dealt by enemies, as in sometimes an attack would fill up multiple bars, sometimes they wouldn't even fill up one, but each one of those segments is basically an attack of your whip. So you could get hit, whip, get hit, whip, get hit, whip, or basically build this up to full stacks and then send out all of these retaliation whip chains, which deal damage but also send out a wave of damage, so they're ranged as well. The interesting synergy here, and I apologize for not knowing the name, I will make sure to familiarize myself with all of the names once I've got a little bit more time on. This gameplay session was only 30 minutes with Amon, but in this skill tree, his trait allows him to summon a flame wall that also absorbs damage and blocks damage. And if you're using it outside of your action skill, it is just, basically a barrier. Think like Zane's shield that you can put down and you can shoot through, and enemies can't shoot back through. So you can use it as cover. But if you use it while your action skill is active and you're holding out the shield, any damage that goes into this firewall will actually give you segments of damage to use for your whip. So, there's probably scenarios if you're playing with friends or something like that, that, if you're using this action skill and the boss isn't targeting you, then all of a sudden, you're not building up any whip charges. Like if you're playing with a group, I was thinking, oh, this might not feel very good because you're not going to be building up any charges, but you've got this optional utility for building up extra charges as well by putting down this flame wall. Let's say you put it down in front of your buddy and your buddy is getting attacked, but you aren't getting attacked. You're still going to be very quickly charging up all of those whip charges so that you can use them. And I thought that was actually very, very clever kind of solution to the whole I only deal damage if I take damage. I did get to mess around with Amon's Onslaughter attack, which is Fire Punch. However, I only got to use this against the boss, the final Vault Guardian boss. And so it was a little bit awkward feeling there, honestly. That boss is very, very fast moving, and there's only certain small weak points. So that didn't feel all that great, but I'm sure it would feel very good against more so trash mobs. The next thing that I got to mess around with in this kind of newer build, I guess two things. One was the Combat Raider, which I mentioned earlier, that just makes navigating combat so much better. It's just so much better feeling getting the information of exactly where enemies are versus where the Combat Raider. It was really hard to tell if you had a red dot, if they were right next to you to your right, or they were 50 meters away to your right. So that felt way better. But the other thing that felt better, and I made a complaint about it, and I actually had a lot of other people have a similar complaint, that just the sensitivity tuning on Borderlands 4 felt wrong, where it was just I could never quite get a aim sensitivity that felt good. And granted, I was playing for very, very short, limited amounts of time, so I didn't really have time to really fully try to get a good aim feeling, but I've heard from Gearbox now that this build that we played, they turned down the aim sensitivity multiplier, where it was doing larger increments while you were scrolling with the bar, to now more finer increments so you can more finely tweak your aim. And I definitely felt a bit of that in that just in general, combat and aiming felt better for where I wanted to adjust. My aim still not great, and there was still some awkwardness, obviously, like on a new setup that I've never used before. But it was definitely noticeably easier trying to tweak that sensitivity to feel better than it was before. Last thing to mention is kind of the overall feel of playing Amon. Now, they've said that Amon is they want him to feel heavier and kind of slower. And I want to be honest, I didn't quite feel that. Like he's not actually slower than the enemies, and I personally didn't feel like he felt slower than them, which, in my opinion, is honestly a good thing. However, you definitely notice Amon's height. A lot of the enemies that you're fighting normally on like Vex or Rafa are, you're staring into their eyes, and with Amon, all those same enemies are staring at his chest. And so that kind of like hulking feeling of where you feel bigger than everything else, and when you're hitting enemies with a melee attack, you're hitting down on them rather than kind of like hitting equal at them. That I definitely noticed, and it was very apparent in his like gameplay field that you were this like larger character. In addition to that, Amon just feels very good to play in my eyes. His action skills all felt quite strong. They were impactful, and his ability to use all of his action skills and kind of, adapt what action skill you wanted to use. I messed around with the swords, the axes, and the hammers. I could see kind of a situation for using each one. That all felt awesome. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. I'm going to leave y'all with some raw gameplay of Amon so you can kind of hear and get a better feel for his abilities. I will catch y'all in the next one, guys. Take care. Peace.